island of Singapore lies at the end of the Malayan Peninsula as it reaches down from Thailand, and the Indonesian archipelago stretches around the island as though Singapore were the star in a crescent of nations peopled by Muslims. Nestled along the vital sea lanes between the Middle East and the rest of the Orient, Singapore has grown from a tiny fishing village into a bustling world emporium. The city of Singapore, like its ever-changing skyscape, has charted a course for the future where there is no room for the past. So much business has flowed in since 1981 that Singapore has become the world's second busiest port. Only Rotterdam surpasses it. An enormous building program is providing modern housing and creating a homogeneous way of life. Government efforts to build what it calls the rugged society are forming a new Singapore. Dropping so much as a spent match is subject to heavy fine. By the 1990s, 80% of the people will be housed in 10 to 20-story concrete apartment blocks that are being erected at the amazing rate of one flat every 17 minutes. People are moving from crumbling two-story Chinese shophouses, from tin-sided hovels along the river, and from rural kampongs, where families keep a common vegetable patch and share the bill for a neighborhood light bulb. Singapore's 225 square miles of diamond-shaped jungle and concrete are an amalgam of Western and Oriental cultures. 52% of Singapore's 2.5 million people are under age 20, with an undisguised pride in their economic and social progress of recent years. They call themselves Singaporeans rather than Chinese, Malayans, or Indians, as their fathers did. Prominent religions of the world flourish in such a multiracial society. Singapore is a colorful mosaic of Hinduism, Mohammedanism, and animism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity. Geographic position and religious liberties make Singapore a good location for the headquarter offices of the Far Eastern Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Overall operations are administered in countries as far north as Japan and Korea, southward through the Philippines and Indonesia, and west to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. A vast territorial expanse with more than 613 million people. J.H. Zachary, Division Ministerial Secretary, keenly senses the need to discover ways to reach these millions with the gospel.
The most prominent religion among the nations of the Far East is Buddhism. Before we can be effective with those who worship Buddha, we must understand their thinking. We must develop new lines of communication.
For Stephen Wong, the change from Buddhism to Christianity has been an intense experience. As a young boy, he was taught evil spirits would harm the family if he did not carry incense to the altar each day and participate in all religious festivals. My father, Stephen told Chaplain Lim, wanted me to get a good education. So when I was 16, he sent me to the Adventist school. Before long, he became very ill, and on his deathbed, I promised him I would never become a Christian. Months later, I became very ill and was taken to the hospital. I worried about the family and my mounting bills. Then, one day, some classmates and teachers came to see me. From then on, I began to see the Christians in a different way. When I returned to school, I sensed a very special power as we studied the Bible together. I was impressed that I must follow Jesus. My mother became bitter and pleaded with me. She reminded me of my promise to my father. But I had found a love I had never known before. On March 17, 1984, Stephen was baptized and became a member of the Chinese Seventh-day Adventist Church in Singapore. 4 days later, he was enlisted into national service, where he has faced untold trials for his faith. His testimony? God seems so close to me. I trust in him. I rely on him at all times.
There are over 200 million people who follow the teachings of Muhammad in the Far Eastern Division. This is 1/3 of our entire population. Our challenge is to discover ways to reach these people with the gospel, to convince them of the authority and the inspiration of the Bible.
Conversions to Christianity from the Islamic world are truly modern miracles. Abdul Mahid was born in the Muslim province of Sulu, an island between the southern Philippines and Borneo. His father is a high priest, and Abdul was raised to be a faithful disciple of Muhammad. But, says Abdul, I grew restless and left school. I got a boat and soon was making money as a smuggler. One night, I was caught in a terrible storm and lost everything but my life. I decided to go back to school. At the first 2 universities I visited, I was uncomfortable, so headed for another. On the bus, I met a lady who invited me to try Mountain View College. What happened? Abdul has been a Seventh-day Adventist minister for 10 years. He holds 7 evangelistic efforts a year, and baptisms total well over 5,000. He says, when I stepped on the campus of Mountain View College, it seemed like heaven. I wrote my father that it was an ideal situation because here I could witness for the Muslim faith. But God had other plans.
17% of the people in the world live in the Far Eastern Division. They embrace nearly every religion known to man. Hinduism is the belief of thousands.
Zachary went on to explain that Hindus believe they must leave their culture behind to become a Christian. Padma, a secretary in the Far Eastern Division office, was born to Hindu parents in Singapore. A neighbor, Regu, was also a Hindu, but his parents enrolled him in a Catholic school. When the time came, Regu had to leave for the national service. During those years, he began studying the Bible with some Seventh-day Adventists. Padma says, our families had always worshipped the Hindu gods. When Regu came back from service and we learned he was a Christian, my mother was very angry with him. For 6 years he tried to convince me about the things in the Bible. I was impressed with his kindness to my mother and his patience with me, says Padma. But it was hard because my mother was so opposed to Christians. Regu would always tell me, let's pray for her. I was baptized. We were married, and our prayers for my mother have been answered. She is now a Christian. Zachary says the nations of the Far East still hold new frontiers, vast, unentered places.
10 million people in our division are animists. Most of these are tribal people scattered throughout hundreds of rural areas, each with their own customs and language.
Besides those millions, there are 28 cities in these countries with a population of over 1 million. The challenge of this church is to discover the best method to reach these masses with the gospel. Over the past 75 years, Seventh-day Adventists have become well established in these large metropolitan centers, as well as in less populated areas. Singapore has 6 Seventh-day Adventist churches. The 2,000 members of this city are a fractional part of the total division membership of 575,000. Projecting an example for growth, Singapore members purchased a lot costing $600,000 in the new city of Jurong on the western part of the island. Local mission director Danson Nung says this is the first new Seventh-day Adventist church to be built in Singapore in 60 years. Members, he reports, have been contributing $15,000 a month to meet the construction costs of $1 million. Only 5 Adventist families live in the western part of the island. But this new church complex includes an auditorium seating 700 and facilities for many kinds of community services. The Southeast Asia Union headquarters, located in the city of Singapore, are one of the 13 unions of the Far Eastern Division. The 23 hospitals of the division include Youngberg Memorial. The beginning of medical work in Singapore was made possible by the 13th Sabbath offering taken the 4th quarter of 1946. Distribution and sale of literature has been a key to church growth throughout these lands. Established in 1919, the Southeast Asia Publishing House in Singapore is one of 10 in this division. As church leaders study and plan for new ways to reach the unreached, they look to youth being trained in Seventh-day Adventist schools. Besides academies oriented to children of church members, mission schools such as the San Yu High School in the heart of Singapore break prejudices and open hearts. 98% of the several hundred students attending San Yu are from Buddhist families. Lands of the Far East present a tremendous challenge. Every possible method is being devised and implemented to plant the gospel on every island and in every city, because Jesus is coming.
Jesus is coming again, coming again, coming again. Jesus is coming again.
This is Mission Spotlight.